Nate Marchand, personal journal. I'm recording this on a digital voice recorder in case any of the supervillains in charge try to hack my phone. Anyway, it's not a smoking gun, but I may have just stumbled onto a clue about Cameron Winter's shady dealings on the island. I was sitting at my ridiculously oversized desk in my Media Master office. It's still weird for me to say that without forgetting I'm undercover. I was typing at my computer-provided state-of-the-art laptop. The sun was barely peeking over the Pacific horizon in the panoramic window. I sipped from a can of kaiju energy as I finished some dreaded busy work. I've never written so many press releases in my life. Not even when I worked as a journalist. I clicked on my day planner and saw that Winter wanted some promo images finalized for the Monster Music Matsuri. Hopefully I won't be too busy to attend. I've wanted to see Nezera and the baby Gameras for a while. I couldn't find the files on my laptop, so I decided to check my flash drives in the desk drawer. I opened the middle one and stumbled upon a secret compartment nestled between it and the bottom drawer. A block flash drive fell out of it. I picked it up and examined it, seeing a small piece of masking tape with a word written in black ink. It said, Chimera. I inserted the drive into my laptop, and a window popped up with a single folder, also labeled Chimera. I clicked on the drive, but to my annoyance, it was password protected. Username Perkins, it said. This had to have belonged to Corone when she served the board. What would she use as a password, I wondered? I put my semi-useless knowledge to good use, racking my brain for possibilities. My first thought was something from her former life that no one else would know about. Something unexpected. I typed Elgar. No dice. I tried someone she missed dearly and typed Zane. Still nothing. I would have thought for sure that'd be the right one. Her password might have been a little anchor her subconscious used to hold on to her true identity while under the influence of the board's, influencers. I went further into the unexpected someone she misses route by typing Ecliptor. To my shock, the name of her evil pseudo-father worked. I cast aside the worrisome psychology and read the contents of the drive, which were on Project Chimera. From what I could tell, it was a proposal for a PR campaign. The document said, quote, to promote Chimera to current and future tourists on Monster Island, the advertising division will conduct a multimedia blitz to attract attention to Monsterland's newest kaiju, end quote. Newest kaiju? I don't know of any monsters by that name. Not even on the beta or gamma sites. I checked to see if there was anything else about this Chimera, but all I could find was concept art for promotional images based on the part lion, goat, snake creature from Greek mythology. They were gonna have banners all over the island and its website. Program booklets, radio spots, I bet I would have been mandated to read those. YouTube trailers, everything. Whatever this Chimera was, it would have gotten more hype than the Geno movie. Judging by the notes I saw, it looked like this project was scrapped right after I came back from space. Makes sense. The board was too busy trying to spin doctor their nefarious shenanigans. Whatever this was, it would have been huge. That's Jimmy. He says the drifters have arrived, so I need to run to KIJU. I've waited for this day for a long, long time. Today, we're canceling the apocalypse! End journal entry.
Live from the KIJU studios in beautiful Ogasawara. This is the Monster Island Film Vault, Episode 70, The Drifters vs. Pacific Rim. Hello, Kaiju lovers, and welcome to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. I am your host, the newly appointed Media Master on Monster Island, Nate Marchand. You know what, Jimmy? keep your opinions about my promotion to yourself, all right? Okay, I don't need any lip from you about that today. In fact, save it for the guests, because, hoo boy, it's a packed house today here at KIJU. I have not one, not two, but 3 guests with me today. Yes, 3 of the 4 co-hosts of the Drift Space podcast. Jack GMan Hudgens, his sister Rebecca Hudgens, who's here for the first time, and J.R. Villers.
What up?
Hi there.
Don't want to toot my own horn, but toot toot.
Jimmy and I are going to be making liberal use of the rim shot and sad trombone buttons, aren't we?
I'm just saying, Jimmy better behave. There's 3 of us this time.
Oh,
Pacific rim shots.
Nice to meet you, Jimmy.
That's better than some other puns I've heard off of this movie.
Yeah, no, we won't go there.
Yeah,
That's
we're
too
not going to
easy.
go there because certain things are not allowed in the film vault.
So we're not going to mention elbow rocket on this one?
No, Rocket Punch? No, we're keeping Rocket Punch. Yeah, Rocket Punch.
Why would you leave out Rocket Punch?
Yes.
I said elbow rocket, not a rocket punch. Did you
But
watch the
still,
movie?
same thing.
Oh my gosh. Can you already tell we are chomping at the bit? I said this a couple episodes ago. I have been waiting for this moment. I have made it no secret that I adore this movie, specifically Pacific Rim. That's what we're talking about today. And it was only appropriate that I had the lot of you on here because the name of your podcast came from this movie.
Yes.
You are correct.
Yes, it has.
Yes. And speaking of Jaegers, I hear that's how you got here today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you asked us to come on for one of our favorite movies, so we thought it fitting that we roll up in our own personal Jaeger that we've been building secretly.
Yeah. It was really Rebecca's creation, though. She was the engineer for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Rebecca, you are a talented woman.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You know, I got my own podcast. I build Jaegers.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. The Drift Space is actually her show.
Yeah, apparently. So.
I'm just
So
warning
humble.
you people, be prepared for incredibly profound insights from this woman today.
Yeah, that's true.
Be careful, Nate. She might steal your podcast.
She's welcome to try.
The podcast eater.
What was that, Jimmy? Hey, don't say that about Rebecca. My gosh, man.
No, it's fine. It's true.
Careful, Jaeger. It's not your Jaeger, it's hers.
So tell me about this Jaeger. This is not one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so this is the Jaeger Bouncing Betty.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bouncing Betty.
It's approved.
Pronounced Bouncing Betty. And it's... You know, we thought we'd give her a feminine name, you know, and really, I'm not, you know, Rebecca's the engineer here. What are the specs on this thing, Rebecca?
Well, oh, hang on. I got to pull her up. Okay, so Bouncing Betty. Okay, so Bouncing Betty has 4. What was it? What'd you say it was? Vulcan cannons.
Cannons, yeah.
No, Rebecca, you're hold on. That's 2 Vulcan cannons.
Oh.
Because the Vulcan cannons, sorry, we talked about this. The Vulcan cannons, when all 4 of us are in the Jaeger, the Vulcan cannons turn into arms.
Oh. So it's a
okay.
4-armed.
It's a 4-armed.
Unintentional pun.
Jaeger.
A 4-armed Jaeger. So Goro from Mortal Kombat. Got it.
So anyway, Bouncing Betty has like 4 primary colors: green, red, blue, yellow. Green is Jack's, red is JR's, blue is Dave's, and yellow is moi. I tried to go for a Gundam / Optimus look.
Oh, of course.
But I also added a few of Dragon Ball Z, like Vegeta Saiyan armor to it for a little bit. And if you, I haven't drawn like the full version of it, but if you look closely, you can see the Autobot symbol, the Power Ranger symbol, and then on one side it's the Maximal symbol and the Ultraman symbol.
Oh,
so
is it the SSSP?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Do they work on the island?
Do they work on the island? They come and visit sometimes. Yes, they are occasionally consulted.
Fair, as they should be.
Yes. Although it seems like the SSSP changes its name about every year or so. It's kind of weird.
Odd that happens, huh?
Yeah. And they change teams every year too. It's odd.
I mean, you got to think the retirement plan for them has to be pretty good after just 1 year.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, you would think so.
It's like, all right.
We have been visited by Shin Hayato once. That was interesting.
Man knows his stuff, from what I understand.
Yes. So, yes, Jimmy, stay away from that machine if you know what's good for you. Oh, calm down. Jeez.
Jimmy, Dave's able to pilot this thing on his own. He's one of those who can do it without a partner. Yeah. No, don't. He's big brain. Okay. Don't do it.
We left the best pilot.
Stop ranting, man. Okay. Stop with your ranting. Jeez. Yeah. Like I said, we're all here to talk about Pacific Rim. Fool that I am. I forgot to play the sounder for our season theme, and it's especially tragic because it is the most appropriate one for this film. America, 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 Ameri-kaiju. We now return you to your regularly scheduled MIFV episode. And I actually can't take all the credit for this, for the Toku topic. This was actually a suggestion given to me by previous guest host and MIFV Max member on Patreon, Damon Noyes, who suggested that we talk about cloning, because that's how the precursors make their kaiju. They just crank them out through cloning like they're an assembly line.
Which always kind of, I don't know, I found the cloning thing in this movie to be the one thing that kind of bothered me. And I feel like it bothers me for reasons pertaining to other franchises. Because I feel like in most franchises, when you have a clone, they aren't able to reproduce. Am I wrong here? I thought it almost seemed like this was a universal thing.
I mean, that's why I did some research. Also, I have some firsthand experience with weird clone making.
Jack, you have seen Jurassic Park, right?
Oh boy. Life finds a way.
Finds a way.
She got me there. She really did. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm down. All right, I'm listening. Go on.
Or in this case, alien invaders. Find a way.
Find a way. Yeah.
Yeah, find a way. All right. But in order to do that, I first have to read the entertaining info dump written by my intrepid producer over there. No longer contractually obligated. It's just tradition at this point. So let's get everybody on the same page about this spoiler warning, incredible film, and then we'll dive deep into it. While they are vehicles and have no actual personality, the giant robots called Jaegers are the protagonist monsters of the film. The most important ones to the story are Gypsy Danger, Striker Eureka, Crimson Typhoon, and Cherno Alpha, with Gypsy serving as the hero mech. Each one was constructed in a different country and embodies cultural elements from said country, such as Cherno Alpha resembling a Russian nuclear reactor, as well as some personality traits of their pilots. Several other Jaegers make cameos throughout the film, including Tacit Ronin, Romeo Blue, Horizon Brave, and Coyote Tango. The kaiju are ferocious and unrelenting bioweapons engineered by invaders called the Precursors from the other side of a dimensional rift called the Breach. They are sent through the portal to attack coastal cities and prep Earth to be terraformed into a more conducive environment for the Precursors. Multiple kaiju are seen throughout the film, including Trespasser, Hunden, Knifehead, Mutavore, Onibaba, Otachi, Leatherback, the Baby Kaiju, Scunner, Raiju, and Slatter. Several others are mentioned or make cameos, such as Hardship, Kaisef, Karloff, Yamarashi, and Reckoner. Raleigh Beckett is the emotionally scarred and humbled co-pilot for Gypsy Danger. Once cocky and self-assured, he isolates himself after losing his brother and co-pilot Yancey during the Kaiju War, but he is now being pressed back into service for one more decisive strike against the Precursors. The stern but caring Stacker Pentecost is a marshal for the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps overseeing operations in the Shatterdome. He defies his commanders to mount a final strike, so he pools what few resources, Jaegers and pilots, he has left for this desperate mission. The quiet and perfectionistic Mako Mori is a PPDC officer and Pentecost's adopted daughter. She is determined to become a Jaeger pilot, which her father is against, and which complicates matters when it's learned she's drift compatible with Raleigh. Newt Geisler and Herman Gottlieb are a pair of enthusiastic and grumpy, respectively, scientists studying kaiju at the Shatterdome. Their research is essential to Pentecost's operation, and their discoveries and insights help the protagonist overcome obstacles. The proud Herc Hansen and arrogant Chuck Hansen are the father and son pilots of Striker Eureka. The two have a strained relationship, and Chuck in particular clashes with fellow pilots, especially Raleigh, whom he sees as inferior to him, which puts him at odds with his father. Hannibal Chow is a short-tempered and cynical black market dealer specializing in kaiju body parts. Newt goes to him to buy a kaiju brain so he can drift with it to gain intelligence on the Precursors. While the characters are the focus of the story and they have their own subplots, their stories are unified with the kaiju plotline. Their development is tied to the actions of the kaiju and their interactions with the kaiju, who are the dragons who must be slain. The kaiju are the problem. The prologue mentions and depicts various methods used to kill the kaiju, including fighter jets, tanks, and missiles, which eventually stopped the first kaijus, but the next waves of kaijus got stronger. The first generation of Jaegers were created to combat these, but most of the Jaegers were eventually destroyed during the war. Giant walls are constructed around coastal cities to keep the kaijus out, but the kaijus break through. 3 kaijus attack Hong Kong, so 3 of the remaining Jaegers are dispatched from the Shatterdome to intervene, but the kaijus destroy or disable them. Gypsy Danger, with Raleigh and Mako as pilots, is then sent, and after an intense battle, they kill all 3 kaijus. The PPDC sends Gypsy Danger and Striker Eureka, with Pentecost and Chuck piloting the latter, to deliver and detonate a nuclear bomb inside the breach to close it. They are attacked by 3 kaijus, including a new Category 5 Slattern, and 1 kaiju eats the nuke. Striker Eureka is forced to self-destruct to kill the kaijus, damaging Gypsy Danger. The problem is solved when Raleigh ejects Mako and pilots Gypsy Danger into the breach with a wounded Slattern, crushing it. He ejects just before the Jaeger passes through the other end, and once in the Precursor's dimension, the robot self-destruct is detonated, killing the Precursors and sealing the breach. The script by Travis Beacham and Guillermo del Toro is a simple, old-fashioned sci-fi adventure story with an ensemble of characters who have their own subplots intertwined with the main story. With a budget estimated between $180 to $200 million, Del Toro supervised all the special effects, both practical and digital, created by ILM. The Jaeger cockpits were constructed as massive sets on moving platforms to create the shaking. Green screens were used to create huge areas and vistas such as the Shatterdome hangar. The mecha and monsters, while digital, were designed and implemented as if they were men in suits. Meticulous details were poured into everything to create as authentic a world as possible, with everything from rust to logos. The overall effect is astonishingly excellent and creates a vivid, fully realized universe unlike anything seen in film. The film is relatively light in tone, but it gives plenty of gravitas to its characters and situation. The humor in it doesn't feel out of place or intrusive. With its giant robots and interdimensional aliens who use kaijus as weapons, it is definitely pulpy, fantastical science fiction. This is an experimental film in that nothing like it had ever been done in American film. It takes 2 distinctly Japanese genres, mecha and kaiju, and combines them. In fact, nothing quite like this came before it in Japan. This, combined with it being an original IP with no built-in audience, which bucked the trend in Hollywood at the time, it was a major risk for the studio despite being helmed by a popular director. The film established a style, especially as American science fiction films are concerned, with its concept, world, and aesthetics. It remains unique in both genres and has yet to be copied in film form. Del Toro dove into the production of this film after his proposed adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness was rejected. He didn't want the resources he'd initially gathered for it to go to waste, and it also helped him overcome the depression he felt over the proposal's rejection. He meant for it to be a tribute to tokusatsu and anime. As such, the intended audience was fans of both medium/genres, as well as sci-fi and action movie fans. The film opened number 2 at the box office its opening weekend, eventually grossing a mere $101.8 million domestically. However, it did better overseas, particularly in China, earning another $309.7 million for a total of $411.5 million. The international gross was successful enough for a sequel to be considered. Critically, it received generally positive reviews and remains a beloved film in the kaiju and tokusatsu fan bases. It was nominated for multiple awards, winning a few, and spawned a franchise that spans comics, video games, and TV series. It has a 6.9 score on IMDb with nearly 500,000 ratings. Multiple forces are at play in this film. The precursor's colonialism clashes with humanity's right to exist. The kaijus often cause drastic changes to Earth's environment, such as pollution from their blood. Both Raleigh and Mako are grief-stricken, which makes them emotionally distant. Black market capitalists like Chow exploit kaiju remains for illicit profit. Pentecost proactiveness clashes with world leaders' growing cynicism, as seen in Pentecost's continued belief in the Jaeger program and the opposition's construction of walls. The more serious-minded Gottlieb dismisses Newt's fanboyism over kaiju, seeing it as in bad taste. Chuck's ego puts him at odds with most people, especially his father. Pentecost is overprotective of Mako, who insists on becoming a Jaeger pilot. Many themes are found in the film. Quote-unquote, old-fashioned heroism is celebrated, as seen in the often self-sacrificial acts made by characters like Pentecost. Pentecost learns to let go as an adoptive father and let Mako become a pilot. Proactiveness ultimately triumphs as opposed to ignoring the problem. Ingenuity from unlikely places like Newt wins the day. Mako is able to avenge her family against the kaijus. Most prominent of all is unity. People from all backgrounds set aside their differences and come together for the purpose of defeating the precursors. In doing so, they learn to connect with one another, both inside and outside of the drift, forming strong bonds that help them cancel the apocalypse.
What are we waiting for? I need some Toku Talk about this movie now!
All right, like I said, spoiler warning, I love this movie. That's as good a place as any to start.
Give me more!
You know, I think in all honesty, I remember years ago listening to a podcast. I think it was like the Slash Film podcast. And Kevin Smith was a guest speaker on it. And they were talking about The Dark Knight. And they wanted to like go into like, you know, plot synopsis and all that jazz and talk about, you know, a very structured discussion with it. And then Kevin Smith goes and was like, hey, man, why don't we just like forget that for just a second and we just talk about how much we love this effing movie? And I was like, man, that I feel you at the time. And I can say the same about Pacific Rim. Let's just talk about how much we love this movie for just a second here, man. This is one of my favorite
movies. Let me count the ways. I mean,
yeah. Right, it's one of my favorite movies of the last 2 decades or so. When I went to see this movie, I was smiling ear to ear. I saw it at least 4 or 5 times in theaters. It got better each time. It gets better every time I watch it. I just can't, you know, I don't think I've had the same feel of wonder and excitement in a movie since then. And I hadn't really had it since probably when I saw Jurassic Park in theaters. You know.
Oh, so you have seen Jurassic Park. Okay.
Well, here's the thing that kind of annoys me about it. And
hold on. Let me take my gloves off here. And Rebecca, I hear there's a bar somewhere on the island. Maybe we can.
There is Nessie's Brasserie, in case you want to go there. But do I need to play this for you guys? I'm just saying. I know a bit about sibling rivalry. I know what it's like, Jack, to have an annoying little sister. I get it, but in fact, I have a couple of them. One on the island, one not on the island. So, yeah.
Aren't they the best?
Yeah, only when one is...
They keep you on your toes.
Yeah,
they just keep you on your toes.
Yeah, and occasionally saving the island from weird bug ladies who part of a Mothra cult. But anyway...
God bless them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit back here and enjoy being an oblique sibling.
I wouldn't trade it for the world, let me tell you. Oh, man. But here's the thing, and I think this is a good thing, a good place to start, because I listened to Del Toro's commentary on this movie in preparation. And he talked about how William Gibson, there were a lot of people that he said he admired, and he listed a whole bunch of them, people like Takashi Miike, and oh man, I wrote it all down. But one of the ones that he singled out specifically was author William Gibson, who adored this movie. This is the guy who famously wrote Neuromancer, which is considered the first cyberpunk story. It was a novel back in the 80s. Yeah, Takashi Miike, Hideo Kojima, creator of Metal Gear Solid, and Gibson went on record as saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this movie is unabashedly itself, and anyone who doesn't like it for being itself.
Yeah.
Basically.
No, yeah.
That's a nail on the head.
And what annoys me is I have heard other podcasts who they like this movie, but they almost seem like they have to qualify the fact that they like this movie. The description that one in particular gave was Pacific Rim is dumb done smart. And I'm like, guys, no. Okay, this is not a dumb movie. Why do people think this is a dumb movie?
Well, it's surface level is what it is, because I talk to people all the time that are like, they ask me, what's your favorite movie? And, right off the bat, Pacific Rim. Oh, that's that movie where the robot bows to its opponents. I'm like, dude, you've only seen a clip. He doesn't bow. Like, they judge it right off the bat just by that, like, knuckle crack he does. Gypsy Danger does.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're missing the point of the movie.
I know,
sure, there's
right?
dumb fun in it, but, like, if you dive into it, there's so much more to look into.
I mean, yeah, the thing that's interesting about this is even Del Toro said this movie is both simple and complex, if that makes any sense. He admitted the characters in this are archetypes, but that doesn't make them terrible characters. I've heard people make that criticism. It's like the characters are just archetypes. Yeah, and you know what other movies have archetypal characters? You ever heard of Star Wars?
Thank you. See,
that's why Dave's not here, because he knows he'll be wrong.
It blew my mind on our show when Dave, started kind of railing on the characters. Because I thought to myself, you a Star Wars fan are getting on to the simplicity of the characters. You're a Star Wars fan. I don't like, because the original 1977 Star Wars had, just archetypes as well. But that's also why we loved them so much. They were very simple, straightforward characters that did their job well. Now, yes, they expanded on them in later movies and novels, expanded universe.
We know you have opinions.
Yeah.
So does my producer. So,
but if you just look at the original Star Wars and why it works so well, it is the simplicity of those characters. And the same thing goes for Pacific Rim. They are character archetypes that do their job well. So well, in fact, that even the minor characters you can't help but feel for, like Hercules Hansen and his son.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in love with those characters.
I'm in love with the names. How they
the names.
It should be noted that Pacific Rim wins the prize for best naming conventions for everything. Characters, robots, kaiju, locations. I was just, how do you get that many cool names in one story? Someone please tell me. I mean, come on. Stacker Pentecost? Oh my god.
I was just going to say, can you guys start calling me Stacker Pentecost? Just, please.
The Shatter Dome? Oh my gosh. That's such a cool name. And then all the robots? My gosh. That's right. Like you either have the best naming convention ever, or you have the coolest name generator of all time. I mean, Gypsy Danger, Striker Eureka, Cherno Alpha, Crimson Typhoon. I mean, it's just
Hannibal Chow.
Hannibal Chow.
Oh my god. Named it after his favorite historian and his favorite
his favorite historical figure.
Restaurant from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how he had to explain that. I also want to take the time here to let everyone know that Shatterdome is both a way cooler and more acceptable name than Castle Bravo. Thank you. Thank you.
Hot take.
Thank you. Right here.
Although I'm gonna say it right here, Jack, for the record, I don't disagree with you.
Because I'm right.
There's that G-Man confidence we know and love.
It's also a name of a pretty cool convention.
Was. Yeah, no, I don't think that convention is the thing anymore, which is a shame.
It's a very much shame.
Yeah. But anyway, so yes, naming conventions, absolutely amazing. What are some other things we love about this movie? So we talked a bit about the characters are archetypes, but they work. What else?
The sword that comes out of nowhere.
Yes.
You know what? I don't care.
I don't care.
I mean, compared to the lead up to that, and Del Toro talked about this. He said, the Battle of Hong Kong is the centerpiece in this movie. But he said, I had to build up to that. And so that's why he had people like Newt, who's a lighter, more comical character. And then you had him with Gottlieb and they butted heads. And then he had Newt go and meet Hannibal Chow. And Hannibal Chow's the most absurd character in the movie. And he totally is. Ron Perlman just owns that character and chews all the scenery and steals every scene that he's in. Yep. He is gold. And then we get to the Battle of Hong Kong, which is just pure anime and tokusatsu. This is anime. This is what happens when anime and tokusatsu have a baby. That's what you get. The Battle of Hong Kong. That is what that is. And so the fact that, that escalates too. We get fisticuffs, we get robot action, and then it ends with frickin' Otachi subtly growing wings and being able to fly into the upper atmosphere. So the fact that a sword comes out of Gypsy Danger's wrist at that point, that is minor by comparison to everything up to that moment.
Well, it's also, it's kind of riffing on, well, not riffing, it's really paying homage to giant robot anime convention where they kind of pull out this
end all. I mean,
out of nowhere. Like it's almost like a Deus Machina in which it just comes out of nowhere to like power up the robot to win the day or something like that.
You and Michael do this all the time. Talk about Power Rangers. It's the Power Sword, man. It's
the Power Sword.
Yeah, it's the Power Sword. You just summon it out of the sky.
It's the final blow. It's the gun from SPD. I mean, it comes out of nowhere.
You know what I thought at the time? Because at the time, JR, I think you and I were pretty knee deep in Gundam 00.
Yes.
And all I could think of is the first episode when the Trans Am is activated.
Oh, yeah.
That's just another example. The Trans Am was this, secret hidden power within the Gundams in this one episode. They were against the ropes and all hope was lost. And then suddenly this power up happens with the Gundam. And I'm thinking, well, of course it does. That's
and
typical.
They don't simply just flip a switch and be like, "Oh, Trans Am's on." They yell it. Yeah. They let it be known. They're like, "Trans Am," and you're like, "Yeah, about to go down."
Wait. Did I hear that right? Did you just summon Jet? Do I need a dump button already?
Imagine if you have to do that for everyday life, like when you have to turn on the lights. It's like turning on the lights. Or
what do you mean? That's what I do every day. Open the fridge! Grab cereal!
My power level! It's over 9,000!
This is my final form!
We joke about this, but you know what? The fact is, they are yelling the attacks in Pacific Rim, and few people make the connection that, again, this is something we see in giant robot anime. This is something we see in Super Sentai, where everyone yells their attacks. Elbow rocket, and then
love that. I love
rocket punch. That's for all of you Marvel vs. Capcom players.
And then, not 2 seconds before, they unload the clip into that kaiju. They just go all out, and then they turn around and go.
Let's make sure it's dead, because double tap. Yeah. Zombieland taught us that very important lesson. Double tap.
He just turns around and says, "Let's check for a pulse." I'm like.
That's also the point. That's also the point we start getting the one-liners again. Mm-hmm. Del Toro built up to that. We're getting we don't get action-moving one-liners until then.
Right.
No pulse.
And it's amazing, the Hong Kong battle set piece that you speak of. I've heard it compared to being one of the best action movie set pieces since the Tyrannosaurus paddock in Jurassic Park. High praise. And I always go back to that. I was like, yeah, because it is so well composed. Mm-hmm. Everything, the colors, the shots, the way the camera moves around a battle that's really well thought out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm never confused.
No. And what's interesting is Del Toro talked about this a lot, because the thing about Del Toro is that he's a very visual filmmaker. And I think that might have been lost on some people, some critics. There are some outspoken critics of this movie who didn't realize that a lot of the story is being communicated visually, so you have to pay attention. Film is a visual medium. It's not a stage play where everything has to be dialogue. And so he would intentionally do things, like he would light it differently. All of the light that is in the film is diegetic. I know that's an improper application of it, but all the light is stuff that is actually in there. So helicopters watching the Hong Kong battle, or the drop ships, if you want to call it that, in the first battle against Knifehead. So it doesn't look as cool. It's very naturalistic lighting, which I think actually enhances it. And he also would tell because he was very hands-on with the special effects and VFX artists. And he told them, when Gypsy Danger is fighting Leatherback, I want you to have the helicopters flying overhead, beaming lights on it, so it looks like a boxing match. So he was paying, and he intentionally, especially with the Knifehead fight, was like, I want the camera to be placed where it could have actually been. I'll still cut around it, but I don't want just some super cool camera angle that could never actually exist in real life.
Star Wars.
Huh?
Oh, wait, no, Star Trek. I
was just like, what?
every time the Enterprise blows up, you're like, how did they get that shot?
I love how the whole movie itself, it's like a painting, and they use the colors not just for the mood of the environment, but to give off the spirit of the characters. And I mentioned this in our last episode of Pacific Rim, and on our
Pacific Rim,
specifically Pacific Rim.
I'm just saving time, guys. Catch up.
Specific Rim. That's funny. Very different, I think. But
yeah, I loved how Mako's red shoe represented her heart, and the blue bangs and her hair were like lingering sorrow and trauma. But I've also noticed that the suits that in the first scene Riley and Yancey are wearing, they're white. They're white, and that indicates like innocence and naivete. Naive. Thank you. I can't say that word for some reason. And in some cultures, the color white also means death in a way. I think in Japan
because it's pale.
Yeah, it's pale. But when you see Riley and Mako in the black suits, I'm thinking that it indicates more experience, mastery, and fearlessness toward the unknown. And so it just I love the colors. I love the rain. I love the characters. I love the characters' names.
Yeah, Del Toro said that he was very conscientious of the color. And that's something that, especially when this film came out, that people really appreciated, is because it seemed like this came out at a time, and it's still kind of true even now, where it seemed like blockbusters were sucking the color out, particularly in comic book movies or comic book style movies, because this is definitely a comic book style movie. It's an original property, but it's comic book style. And this just saturated everything with as much color as you could, but it's done very intentionally. Del Toro is a stickler for details. In fact, he went as far as to say, special effects are quote unquote a lie. This is a fascinating theory that he brought up. Special effects are a lie, because you know how you sell a lie? The more detail you put into the lie, the more people will believe it. Basically, he said that's why I pumped so many little details into the special effects for this movie, because that makes it more believable.
Artists use lies to tell the truth.
It's amazing how I catch something new every time I watch this movie. You know, because there is so much to look at in every frame. We talk about how in a lot of movies, how filmmakers apparently do everything with a purpose, frame a shot with a purpose or a symbolic purpose, or light it a certain way. You know, some filmmakers just set up a camera and go. You know, they know how to get a good shot with just basic knowledge, and they do it. Del Toro, I really do believe, is one of those filmmakers who treats every shot like it's the most important shot in the film. And like, for example, there's a shot earlier in the film where Stacker Pentecost comes to visit Raleigh, and Raleigh is sitting in front of some sort of piece of concrete or something behind him that has arch. An arch, like it's a half circle.
Yes.
Right. And he explained how the half circle is to kind of symbolize that the character has an incomplete arc, how he feels incomplete, how he's half of what he used to be without his brother. And it's lit a certain way to evoke this kind of somberness, but something that could also be hopeful. So it's not blue, but it's yellow. Amber. And that it's kind of like amber. It's something that's getting warmer as he gets heated up to go back into get back into a Jaeger. And that just, it blew my mind that he put that much thought into a shot that a lot of people would find kind of like a throwaway shot. You know, all we needed to know was the information that Stacker was giving Raleigh and what Raleigh's reaction was to all this. But it goes back to what you're saying, that this is actually a very complex film. It's not a stupid film. It's a very smart film because of all the thought that went into all the details in every shot.
Yeah, Del Toro mentioned that in his commentary, because he said that, his arc is incomplete because the way he said that he framed the arc for Raleigh is, you know, in each fight, something different happens for him. So in the first fight with Knifehead, he loses a partner, his brother. The second fight in Hong Kong, he gains a new partner in Mako. And then in the third fight, which is the finale of the movie, he saves his new partner, Mako. So it's pardon the pun, it comes full circle.
Exactly. It comes full circle. And the half circle was representative of where he was at currently. What else have I missed?
Well, let me tell you, I have
a movie here.
As I am wont to do, I have a gazillion notes, so we will not get through all of them. This is why Jimmy writes follow-up blogs for every episode. But I will mention this. You talked about shot composition. Del Toro said that his favorite shot in the whole movie is when Leatherback jumps out of the water onto Crimson Typhoon.
Okay, I've heard him say that, but I've either forgotten, you know, what was his reasoning for that, or
he didn't go into it.
I just keep missing it.
Yeah, he didn't go into it. Well, he also said that was his favorite shot, but his favorite scene in the movie is the flashback with Little Mako.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, that's
yeah.
Rebecca mentioned it a few minutes ago about Mako and how she just was wearing that blue suit or a blue jacket and the red shoe in her hand. I mean, go back and listen to our episode. I can't believe I was actually dead on about this, but that's one of my favorite concepts about Mako in that scene is that she's walking around holding not two shoes, but one. The pair is incomplete. She's looking to give that, piece of her heart to somebody. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she sees the first person she sees is Stacker, framed beautifully like he's her hero.
A knight.
Like, yeah, a knight in shiny armor. Like, this is the man who I can trust. This is the man I can give my life to, and not necessarily romantic wise.
No. And they make that abundantly clear that this is a father-daughter
but this
sort of
is a father figure that I can grow with.
Yeah, because the implication is that her parents had died during the kaiju attack. It's very Gamera 3 in some ways there, that where her parents are dead and she's running around, and that's why she's holding that one shoe, which it's the implication seems to be it's a broken shoe. She lost it. Now she's trying to hold on to it. So that's the heart that she's holding on to. And, she's wearing blue. That's why she has the blue bangs, because she's been stained by that event. And, then she sees Stacker, like you talked about, he's the knight in shining armor. She's the princess who has to be saved at that moment. Right. And, so he comes in and he's the Dragon Slayer. He comes in and he kills the kaiju and saves her. And just the way that whole sequence is executed is just incredible.
Yeah. And then like you guys mentioned earlier, is that once after that scene, she's seen with blue in her hair. So she brings that traumatic experience with her every time she steps into a Jaeger, which mind blowing. I love it. Mako's one of my favorite characters in this movie. She's
an incredible character. Yeah, I have to say. And and when you look at how that whole sequence was done, it is incredible. They actually, this movie, believe it or not, this movie came under budget. And it's funny how that happened, because Del Toro actually found ways some really clever and I think stylistically effective ways to save some money. Like when Raleigh was appearing in those memories, they were originally going to make him translucent and kind of ghost-like, and then Del Toro said, no, you don't have to do that. Just have him be there. You don't have to make him ghost-like. It'll save us money on special effects. Or when they transitioned into that scene from when she's in the cockpit, he said, I did that very theatrically. That was all done in the camera. So when she's walking forward, they just deadened the lights, and the actress had the shoe in her hand already, and then she just brought it out at the right moment, and then they green screened the next scene into it. When you look at behind the scenes footage of that scene, that little actress apparently didn't know a lot of English, so Del Toro had to give her direction with an interpreter, which I'm assuming was probably the girl's mother.
No, you just mentioned that scene where she's in the cockpit. Gosh, that scene, like that's a scene I think I just kind of skipped over in my head because I knew what was coming down the road. But when I stopped and actually, like we were talking, picking up things as we watch it every time, I saw that scene. I was like, oh my God, that is so simple, but so effective.
And then my favorite shot in the movie.
Beautifully done.
It really is. And then there's some other visual symbols that Del Toro talked about in the special features on the Blu-ray, which, by the way, I managed to get the Walmart exclusive version of the Blu-ray that had an extra special feature into the film vault, and I'm very proud of myself. But he also said, with Mako, he said, Del Toro said, I have this thing for umbrellas. And umbrellas show up all the time in my movies. And he talked about he intentionally used the umbrella when we were introduced to Mako visually and symbolically, because she's bunched up under the umbrella and nothing can touch her when she's under the umbrella, and she hides herself under the umbrella until she sees Raleigh. And then that's when they meet. They make eye contact when they're both under umbrellas, but they're both under umbrellas by themselves.
Interesting. I never got that.
Yeah, Del Toro always uses inanimate objects or even animals to really bring out the symbolism, like you just delicately explained.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that Mako and Hannibal both have a shoe problem.
Del Toro said he also has a weird thing for shoes. So I guess he's kind of like Tarantino, except it's not feet, it's shoes.
So basically, when Hannibal comes out at that last time saying, "Where's my shoe?" he's basically saying, "Where's the sequel?"
I was thinking,
we don't talk about Uprising. Well, actually, we will.
Talk about Turbo.
Well, actually, we will. Spoiler warning. But anyway, you were saying.
Actually, Jack mentioned in our last episode, I was thinking of The Wizard of Oz at one point where the ruby slippers had guided Dorothy home. And I know he originally used Mako's shoe to represent her heart and everything, but I think it also represents like her home and her family and a familiar state of being. And for Mako's case, she lost her, we went over this, she lost her original home and family as she carried the shoe, but we also see that Pentecost kept the shoe and gave it back to her, kind of like how, well, I'm not comparing Pentecost to Glenda at all. Just,
just imagine him in a pink dress now, just being like, "One, don't touch me. Two,
Dorothy, don't touch me again. Now." Get on that golden brick road. And then you're going to go to Oz and cancel the apocalypse.
Well, basically, yeah, that's kind of...
we'll talk about that speech because, good Lord, I love that speech. Oh, man.
As I said, he kept the shoe and he gave it back to her, meaning he was guiding her back home. And her home happens to be, well, Raleigh's place, or as Raleigh's partner.
I want to ask this question because this is something that I see get debated a lot. Do you guys think that Mako and Raleigh's relationship is romantic, or is it something else?
I think it's more familial.
Yeah.
I don't buy into
it runs deeper than romance.
I don't buy into the romantic thing just because of the way Raleigh describes the drift at the beginning of the movie. You're in each other's head. You kind of grow to know somebody and respect them for that. So I don't see it playing into a romantic relationship now. Well,
and Del Toro also purposefully, made sure that, they didn't kiss at the end or something.
I think, wasn't there at one point there was a take where they kiss and he just didn't like it?
From what I understand, the studio wanted this, but he didn't.
Okay.
And...
yeah, screw you, Hollywood. We're not doing your work.
He just wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't all about that. And I really like that a lot more. I like the fact that we have these two action characters, one male, one female, who are completely platonic, good friends who come to know and respect one another. And they just have a much deeper relationship than romantic. I think it takes away from the movie that type of complexity is skirted aside in favor of a typical Hollywood romance, a typical Hollywood action blockbuster romance, right? I think in some ways it reduces Mako, and I think it reduces the themes of the movie too.
Yeah, I was just thinking it probably would have just negated everything that just happened.
Well, then here's my counter question, I guess you could say, because I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily. What about some of those, like the scene because they're in rooms across from each other and she sees him without his shirt and she gets all embarrassed, closes the door, but then keeps watching through her peephole's not the right word, but
I think what really shocked her was not the fact that he just took his shirt off. I mean, but she saw the scars on him from when he lost Riancy, his brother. I guess in a way it touched her, it scared her, it triggered her in a way, but at the same time, she's very curious of how he lives with that. He lives with those scars. So I
think also there could be a cultural divide with that. It's interesting how there's a lot of things in Pacific Rim that casual moviegoers aren't going to pick up on because they just weren't kaiju fans, or they weren't fans of like the genre that this is highly inspired by. And that works both against and for the movie. It works for the movie because I love that it treats the genre like an art form. Mm-hmm. It takes all of its strengths and weaknesses and treats it like royalty. Unfortunately, not everyone, especially in the West, feels the same way about the genre as everyone on this podcast right now and Del Toro. Okay. Mm-hmm. And one of those things is that in Japan, there's a little bit more of a hard barrier between social norms are just a little different. Like seeing a guy with his shirt off is different for young women in Japanese culture than it is in the West. Mm-hmm. Okay. I used to train with lots of guys and girls on the same team. I had my shirt off all the time. All my teammates had their shirts off all the time. All the girls, they were just wearing sports bras, right? It's 110 degrees when we're running. We would just want to stay cool. Whereas in other cultures, that's not quite as acceptable. Now, I understand Japan is moving a little more in the progressive direction lately, but there are still kind of taboo things, such as seeing a guy with his shirt off in a smaller, kind of more intimate space is kind of embarrassing for them. Mm-hmm. So I just think, I think, you know, it could be the scars, like Rebecca said. It could be what I'm talking about. Or, okay, Nathan, let's say maybe it is to insinuate some sort of attraction there. Maybe this is being left up to the audience to decide whether or not that they're romantically involved. You know, there's a lot of anime and Japanese productions where they leave the relationship between two characters kind of ambiguous. And maybe it's just one of those things that you can.
Well, I mean, the Russian pilots are intentionally left ambiguous, left vague, depending on who you talk to. I think
they were.
I think they're supposed to be husband and wife, but I also saw some stuff in my research where they said that Del Toro actually told the actors to keep it vague. You could be brother and sister, or. You know,
well, I think the reason it's kept vague for the Russians is to imply the fact that their Jaeger, what was it they said? Their Jaeger was a Generation 1, very kind of cold and mechanic. And when you watch it fight, it is very cold and mechanic. Yeah. So I think they wanted to keep that persona of the Russians being this tough outside force that don't really get involved.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah. But to go back to Mako and Raleigh, there was a time where I did go with the interpretation, we'll say, that there was attraction between them. Watching it again, it is left vague enough that I think you could kind of draw your own conclusions. I would not be surprised. The sequel does not explain this to us. I wouldn't have been surprised if they got together later. But the way I looked at it, and this is text, this is something that Del Toro said. Raleigh and Mako are two incredibly broken people who have cut themselves off from others, and they are learning to reconnect with others, and they're learning to do it by connecting with each other. So it's two people who have trouble connecting with others, having to connect with each other. And I think that is the central relationship lesson I think that they're learning, is learning to connect with another human being again, because you have to in order to make the Jaegers work. And that is a theme of this movie, is togetherness. It's a very Ashiro Honda sort of idea. We are stronger together than apart.
So the way I see that, because I've always kind of questioned that scene myself. And I think the way I see it is maybe at first she is kind of attractive to him because, let's face it, she lives in a base with a bunch of other people and she doesn't really get to experience that. So it scares her. But because of the drift, because of that connection that they share, it evolves like we were talking. Their relationship evolves much more than romantic. Like you said about Del Toro, saying they're both broken people. And I think broken people trying to fix broken people doesn't work. Trust me, I know.
Yeah, for sure. But he said that the emotion that he wanted to focus on at the end of the movie was less of a romantic thing and more of a, they are just happy to be alive after everything that has happened. And I totally get it.
I mean, yeah.
But
I'd be happy to be alive.
yeah, I mean, after everything that just went down, I mean, that was let's talk about that finale a little bit. Honestly, I feel like this movie peaks with the Battle of Hong Kong. And honestly, I'm not saying that the finale is terrible by comparison, but after the big ruckus that was the Battle of Hong Kong, I know the stakes are higher in the finale, but it's a little less exciting. What do you guys think?
I'm with you on that. I think I get a little tired once we get to the third act of the movie. I think that throwing in a bigger, better kaiju at the end.
Category 5.
Yeah, I mean, we were expecting it. We kept hearing about how there's only been so many categories. Of course, we were going to see a category 5.
Yeah, because we were classifying the kaiju like natural disasters, like tornadoes, like hurricanes, because in the Japanese tradition, kaiju are basically walking natural disasters. I've talked about that before on the podcast. There are reasons for that. By the way, I credit this movie for making the word kaiju enter the vernacular, because now I hear people throwing the word kaiju around all the time outside of Japan, and I kind of love it. It's basically become a loan word, and I attribute it to this.
I agree with you there.
No, absolutely. I love and hate it. I have some problems with it.
Yeah, anyway, you were talking about the finale.
But anyway, I don't know. The finale gets a little exhausting. I mean, how many ways can we torture poor Gypsy Danger, right? And I was kind of ready to see the conclusion at this point. Not to say that there weren't some excellent moments during the finale. I think the death of Stacker was very emotionally driven.
Yes.
And I did enjoy, while I think there is a place to talk about whether or not the use of nuclear weapons was a good thing here, I do appreciate that it did not take out the Category 5 kaiju. That says something about that, I think. But I did enjoy that Rowley finally came full circle. He rescued his pilot this time. We get a glimpse at the precursors. What is it called? The nether,
the antiverse.
The antiverse. Yeah, that's it. So he goes down to Seatopia to get rid of all the. I'm sorry.
Aquabase 2021.
To get rid of all the Megalon and Geiger. I mean, the kaiju clones. And
you get a thumbs up from Jet for that. He came to the studio.
Jaguar explodes. Jaguar overloads and explodes in front of their face.
In a kind of religiously symbolic gesture too, even though Gypsy's missing an arm.
Yeah, I've never really understood what I think of that. Rebecca, do you have a take on that? Because I don't have a take on that.
Okay, so.
Strap in, folks.
Okay, so here's the F.
Okay, so we all talked about incompleteness, like unfinished circles and circling back, correct? Well,
yes.
Gypsy Danger's quote-unquote heart I believe, was a symbol of completeness and closure, and it was literally a full circle. And I also believe that it was the only way to get rid of the kaiju in this world. And I mentioned it before in our episode. I'm going to mention a lot of things we did in our last episode, because that's
I will leave a link in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you. So they were supposed to cancel the apocalypse according to Stacker Pentecost, right? Now, I mentioned that what if the real apocalypse is not for humanity, but for the kaiju? And I go on a rant on how each Jaeger resembles each of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And Gypsy Danger represents the last horseman, death. And I'm immediately reminded of Oppenheimer's quote,
Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds.
Right. And Gypsy Danger uses a nuclear atom bomb, basically, which is exactly what happened in the past. I feel like Gypsy Danger she took on that burden. She took on the whole completeness and closure and basically threw it back at the enemy's face, the kaiju face, and practically saved all of humanity. And and does that not sound familiar to some people? No.
Yeah, Del Toro mentioned in his commentary that for him it was a reversal. Now the invaders are being invaded by giant monsters.
Right, exactly.
So the ending to me is very Independence Day. So, the plot was to fly up to the mothership, give the ship a virus, and everybody goes down, right? This is basically, the ending is, okay, let's get Jeff Goldblum and Will Smith home. It works for what type of movie it is. But yeah, I think it's extremely kind of lackluster just in the third act because let's face it, that final battle with all the lights and all that, like everything that went on in the Japan fight. Hong Kong fight.
Yeah. Be glad I caught it and not Jimmy.
Yes, thank you. I had no more from Jimmy today. Yeah, it would have been nice if it ended on that, but I kind of find it funny how it just ends with them blowing everything up and then Mako and Riley just sitting on the water, just waiting to be rescued. I kind of like the awkwardness of how that ends. It's like, okay, here we are.
It's befitting for where they are relationally, probably.
It's that scene in Dragon Ball Z. I forget which Dragon Ball Z movie, but it's Piccolo and Vegeta sitting on the ice block. He goes, "Is it over? Not until the fish jumps." And fish pops out of the water and goes, "It's over."
Although
Rebecca brought up something interesting about the Four Horses comparison, because we're looking from our point of view, these Jaegers are our saviors, right? But we have, and she brings up the "now I've become death, destroyer worlds," which is something Oppenheimer said when he created the nuclear bomb. And then we essentially just sent that same weapon inside one of these Jaegers to become the destroyer of their world, right? And the use of the atomic power in this movie has always been something I've kind of struggled with, especially when you dedicate it to Ishiro Honda and
Ray Harryhausen.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, but even Ishiro Honda, he made a movie that used nuclear power in a positive light. It was called Gorath. So this theme isn't necessarily necessary for every single Japan-inspired science fiction or Japanese science fiction. But I do think, when it comes to Godzilla, for example, you definitely need it in there. But Pacific Rim made no promises to be kind of anti-nuclear. However, when Rebecca brought that up, it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition because this awful weapon did just take out a world.
Or at least part of a world.
Well, yeah. By the end of this movie, as far as we know, right? And that's, again, one of Rebecca's long ramblings of thought really helped me kind of process this a little bit better, because it shows that, the weapons we're using is just as catastrophic as they are helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Annoying sister.
Honestly, I think it goes back to the idea that it's not the thing in and of itself, it's how it's used. It's just a tool. A hammer can be used to build a house or cave in someone's skull. Does that make the hammer inherently evil? No. But it goes back to culture. With Japan, they have a much different history with nuclear power than the West does, particularly America. So their views on it are going to be very different. But I still think it ultimately boils down to how is it being used? My first ever science fiction novel actually dealt with this idea. Are WMDs inherently evil, or are they just tools at this point? And if we get rid of the tools, can we stop people from being evil? No, not necessarily. So I see what you mean, though, Jack, that it's a little bit of a struggle for you. I get it.
Yeah, I don't know if I entirely agree with that, because at the end of the day, weapons are weapons. And that in itself is a whole different topic.
It is.
But in terms of Japanese properties pertaining to the kaiju subgenre and whatnot, I typically expect and would want to continue to see an anti-nuclear slant from that material. But again, Pacific Rim, like you said, is still a Western movie. It's only inspired by that subgenre and never made any promises to be about one thing or another.
For me, the way it's used is just a detail. How are we going to power these giant robots? Well, we need a tremendous amount of energy. And how are we going to do that? It's going to have to be nuclear.
Well, until the Mark 4s or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and we do see consequences from it. It may not be directly anti-nuclear, but it acknowledges the dangers of it with Stacker.
Stacker.
Because Stacker's slowly dying of cancer, which he keeps secret. And he says, we threw these things together so fast because they were desperate to have some sort of a weapon. Because the idea, in fact, to be honest, the idea of the Jaegers was to make it so we didn't have to use nuclear bombs. Because it said if we tried to nuke every kaiju that showed up, we would basically render multiple cities, if not the whole world, uninhabitable. They needed a weapon that could have the concentrated power of a nuke, but minimize collateral damage, hence the giant robots. So they said they threw everything together so fast, they didn't think about radiation shielding. And now he's dying of cancer.
Yeah, which always gets me. It's like, how could you not think about... Well,
Desperation will make people do crazy things.
But yeah, no. And again, I don't think that negates the larger theme in this movie, which is universal unity, right? In the face of greater adversity, which, is also a very prominent Ishiro Honda theme, and probably my favorite of his themes that he used.
Brotherhood of Man.
Many of his science fiction films, right? Yeah, exactly. We saw this in The Mysterians. We saw this in Monster Zero. And to see it here, and it evolved in kaiju and tokusatsu so well, because we would see it in Ultraman. We would see, these like special teams come together and help Ultraman against whatever threat of the week we had. And then it evolved further with Super Sentai, which the general theme of all Super Sentai is coming together, sometimes literally with your giant robots, to defeat a larger adversary. It just continued to evolve, and to see Pacific Rim continue that tradition of the genre is really awesome. And I'm glad that Del Toro was mindful of that when he made this movie.
I've always been fascinated about how with Super Sentai, it takes an entire team of superheroes to defeat, generally speaking, one villain. There's some interesting cultural symbolism to mine there. I'm just saying.
But and at the same time, they each have their own giant mech, right? But they never really, often, they don't fight in them individually. They just have their giant mech to, form into one bigger giant mech. They really don't need multiple giant robots. They just need the one, right? But the implication is that, the visual is that they are coming together literally to stop a great threat. That's the symbolism of it. That's the drive of it. It became something that was just expected out of the franchise, but started as, we're going to show them literally coming together to defeat this. And again, in Pacific Rim, you have people coming together. You have Newt and Gottlieb coming. They don't like each other at the beginning of this movie, but then they put aside their differences and come together for the greater good. You have Hercules Hansen's son, who gives that nod to Raleigh after the Hong Kong fight. He even agrees to work with Pentecost during the last mission. I mean, you have people setting aside differences to pull themselves together for a greater cause. And that is the genre. That is the heart of this genre. And Pacific Rim was a beautiful recreation of it.
And that is, I feel like, embodied in the famous speech from Pentecost, where he talks about how, We need to believe. How did he put it? We not only learn to believe in ourselves, but in each other. Del Toro said that he did several takes with Idris Elba. Good Lord, Idris Elba is a tremendous actor. I just want to say the man is full of intensity, but he's also the nicest guy you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
And they did several different takes about how to do that. And he told him, we're not going to stop until you make all the crew applaud when you're done. So he said the take when they're applauding, he's like, yep, that was the one. We finally got it. So that should tell you something. And I mean, you could look at that and just say like, it's trailer bait. Cause yeah, it was used in the trailer, but it works outside of the trailer as well.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that long of a speech either. Mm-hmm. If it was really something that he had shot just for the trailer, I think it would have been a little longer, a little more anticipation there. But Del Toro kept it short, sweet, and powerful, and I love that. It wasn't quite, I see it compared a lot to the speech that President Whitmore gives in Independence Day.
Yeah.
But I don't get that sensation here. I get President Whitmore was kind of like rallying the troops. Mm-hmm. He's trying to pump everyone up to be realistic about what they're going to do. And they did. They canceled the apocalypse. It was a great line. It was a wonderful line. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the moniker of the franchise.
Canceling the apocalypse.
Hashtag cancel apocalypse.
Cancel the apocalypse. I approve of this hashtag. Oh man, like I said, there's a lot to talk about with this. We could go into a lot of stuff. Del Toro had some really interesting things to say. He said he didn't want to make eye candy, but he wanted to make eye protein, which I think is just a funny way to put it. Because he says 50% of a movie's story is visual. And we talked about how he's a very visual director.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
absolutely.
Because, like I said, we talked about this, all the detail he puts in every shot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
It's funny. Here's an interesting thing. I don't know if you guys knew this or not. Did you know that he wasn't? Well, first off, he actually told all of his artists, don't watch any kaiju or tokusatsu. I don't want this to be a nostalgic homage reference movie. I want it to be as original as possible. Influenced, yes, but don't be referencing anything, which I thought was really fascinating.
I feel like Peter Jackson could learn a thing or two with Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, I love that comment. God, do I love that comment.
Oh, hot takes.
I'm sorry. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit just took forever.
So Ramin Djawadi did the soundtrack for this movie. When I first found out he was doing it, I thought I wasn't thrilled. I'll be honest. I thought it was going to be a fairly themeless and uninteresting soundtrack because beforehand, not to say the first Iron Man has a bad soundtrack, but one of my greatest complaints about it was that his theme for it was never really fully formed. And I was concerned he was going to go into this with kind of the same mindset. But Del Toro is such a stickler for audio and music that I can only assume he spoke with him about how this needed to have a standout theme and emotional motifs and whatnot. And the Pacific Rim theme with, I believe Tom Morello does the guitar on it.
Mm-hmm. Formerly of Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is, now that I think about it, it's kind of funny given the name of that band.
Mm-hmm. I think this is Djawadi's best musical piece. Easily. And he did Game of Thrones, which has some great pieces there, but it felt really outside of the remote control composers that normally come out. And for those of you who don't know, Remote Control Productions, that's Hans Zimmer's kind of like workshop where he makes a lot of clones of himself, right? A lot of Hans Zimmer clones, like Steve Jablonsky or Henry Jackman, etc., come out of, the workshop there. And Ramin Djawadi, he's been kind of, he's had the reputation of another Hans Zimmer clone. But I really do think he transcended that with this particular score. And I love all the different themes he has. He made enough themes for a television series.
Yes.
Like everyone gets their own theme. And I almost wish the movie was longer just so we could flesh out that soundtrack with all those different themes a little bit more.
Yes.
Everyone gets their own theme. The movie itself, the Pacific Rim theme, is
I
just realized I forgot to play my my little Ameri-kaiju sounder. I'll have to add it in post that uses a cover of the Pacific Rim theme.
It's so catchy. Like, so I'll catch myself. I'll be at like Target shopping or something like that, and I'll be like, it kind of just, it makes your tongue click a little, right? It's unlike any of his other pieces.
You know what?
And it gets me pumped up.
I'm just saying. I'm going to throw this out there. We were talking about this a little bit pre-show. Pacific Rim has one of the best film soundtracks of the last 10 years.
Amen.
If not more.
Amen.
The only other modern blockbuster soundtrack I can think of that is in the same league as this is the soundtrack to Tron Legacy, which was a couple years before this. And I don't know why neither of these scores didn't get nominated for Oscars or something, because they deserved it.
Okay, because the Oscars,
because Oscars
is stupid.
Doesn't mean
it's almost more of an honor not to be nominated these days.
Yeah,
but I'm with you. He created a very strong score that wasn't just all noise either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just the action pieces. It's the slower pieces that really get to you. I mean, that whole piece during the flashback with Mako being saved by Stacker.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful piece.
Mm-hmm.
I put that on repeat sometimes. It's all the way through a fantastic score. And if you can get your hands on the complete score,
which I did for the Film Vault. Thank you, Jack. You were the one who made me aware of it.
If you can get your hands on the complete score,
yes,
it is a hell of a listen.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece.
Oh yeah, it is tremendous. I can't say that enough. And oh my gosh, the thing, and I actually think what makes it work so well for this movie is Del Toro intentionally wanted to make a film that was humanistic and not militaristic, which is interesting because you're thinking back to classic tokusatsu, Ifukube. He cut his teeth doing military marches during World War II, and his music has a very march-like cadence to a lot of it, at least when his scores for tokusatsu and Godzilla films. We don't get that in this. And that's also why Del Toro was intentionally trying to avoid terms like general and, militaristic ranks, and he preferred things like ranger, because he himself is a pacifist. So he did not want to have a very military-centric film. He wanted this to be about characters, about people coming together and solving a problem. I think Travis Beacham said in an interview, it's like, there are movies that are about incredible disasters. This is a movie about incredible solutions.
Yes. And it's so true, because another thing that, Honda would typically do is undermine the military and undermine politics. And it would be normal people that find the solution, right? Mm-hmm. Or scientists. Scientists would find the solution a lot too. Mm-hmm. We go back to the original 1954 Godzilla, where Godzilla walks through the Diet Building, where that big argument through the wing, actually, where that massive argument was happening earlier in the film. He criticizing how politics doesn't get anything done. And then a giant monster just smashes through where that argument was happening. Early on in the movie, I love the line Pentecost says, "We don't need them." We
are the resistance.
All these politicians and military heads, telling him what to do, what he can't do, what they won't help with, etc. And he's just, we don't need them. Yeah, well, and because their solution is to build walls and ignore the problem. Well, the problem just smashed through your walls. It doesn't care about your walls. You can't ignore the problem. You have to address the problem. It is interesting to think about. Their solution was to build walls along borders to solve their problems. But instead,
and Del Toro is a Mexican filmmaker.
But instead, the solution was bringing people together across borders to find the solution. I love that. It's wonderful. Wonderful movie.
Yeah, it is. And it was funny. They even tried calling it things like the Wall of Life. And there's little details in the signage and everything that basically says, this will this wall will be completed and someone spray painted never. Something like that.
Clearly, these people have not seen Attack on Titan. So.
Or World War Z, for that matter. Walls don't typically keep monsters out, unless it's monsters, and then it actually works. Gareth Edwards monsters. But there's a bit of commentary in that one too. But we'll save that for a future episode. That is not what we're talking about today. There's a lot that we could go into about this. I know, unfortunately, Jack, you need to leave us a little bit early. Go check on Dave and double up to make make sure Jimmy doesn't steal Bouncing Betty.
Yep. Bouncing Betty. Hey,
you said it wrong.
Huh?
You gotta pronounce it right. Bouncing Betty.
Oh, okay. My apologies. But
where is Jimmy? Jimmy
has been quiet.
He has been remarkably quiet.
No. Get away from that. I gotta go, guys. He's already. Get away from there. Get away from there.
That's fine. I will just leave us all with this one last bullet point that I think is a great way to end this segment of the show before we get to the Toku topic, which is Del Toro didn't want to be postmodern and ironic about this movie. He wanted it to be about simple, effortless heroism and a tribute to the kaiju and tokusatsu films that he grew up seeing. And he said he wanted to make this movie for the kids who are going to talk about it 10 years from now. And now look at us. We're those kids. It's almost 10 years later, and we're talking about this movie.
I think you should say we're still talking about this movie.
Yes.
I'm still in awe of it. And I can go back and find something new almost every time I watch it. It's wonderful.
I said, I have a slew of notes that we didn't get to for the sake of time. So we're still
plenty. Watching it, we're still listening to it, and we're still waiting for Guillermo to film the real sequel.
The real sequel. Yeah, well, first he has to get done with the 97 other things that he's doing.
Yeah.
We can wait.
And we're still in Target going,
all right, and with that, we'll move on to the Toku topic. I'm the kaiju guy now thanks to the Monster Island Film Vault, but before that I was the superhero guy. I wonder if there's a way I could combine those.
Hey, Nathan.
Travis from Kaiju Weekly?
Yeah, I'm here because I need a co-host for a new Toku Heroes podcast.
Oh? What's it called?
Henshin!
Standing by. Complete.
That's right, heroes. We are the Henshin Men, a tokusatsu superheroes appreciation podcast.
Join us as we watch several episodes of a TV series from the wide world of Henshin heroes and discuss their merits and cultural significance.
Starting with one of my all-time favorites, the original Kamen Rider from 1971.
We'll give out awards for things like the best action scenes and crazy what the Henshin moments.
So hear us every Monday in your favorite podcatcher to get your weekly Rider kicks.
Gotta go, because we only have a minute to Henshin it. All right, unfortunately, your fearless leader? Is he the fearless leader at the Drift Space?
Nobody leads me.
Oh, really?
Really?
I think.
I might want it. No. Anyway.
Well, oh, wait, I forgot. I stand corrected. We all know that, we keep forgetting, I should say, it's Rebecca's show. Right.
It is Rebecca's show.
It's Rebecca's show.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Jack is still the Red Ranger on your podcast, but
right.
Yeah. JR might tell you this because when he was on the power trip, Michael and I told him what all of your Ranger colors would be. So, and he did not disagree. So
no. This is Time Force rules where pink is actually the leader.
Except we didn't make Rebecca pink.
Yeah, we made her.
We made her yellow.
I'm yellow, man.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other subject for a whole other podcast. I'll tell you a bit about it when we're done, Rebecca. But we're going to get into the Toku topic for today, cloning. Let me tell you, I do have a little bit of experience with cloning because, well, it gave me a pseudo-sister. To talk about shenanigans.
And apparently, I just cloned myself on this podcast.
Yeah, when we were downloading your audio files during the break, suddenly there were more of you. It was odd. Yeah.
I started my own collective.
Yeah. Yeah, nice job vamping for us during that time. So anyway.
I want to go back to this pseudo-sister thing. Like, well, how did that work?
I'll tell you about it afterward, and then I'll introduce you to. You get along, I'm sure. Where you already know a little bit about her. You made her profile pic on Twitter, where she bugs the snot out of me all the time. And then bugs the snot out of me in real life, because that's how it works, right? You know all about it. You're a little sister.
Well, yeah. We go to the same meetings. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the little sister meetings. Oh, goodness. Maybe you were better off, JR. I don't know. I'm kidding.
No. I enjoy my solitude. I enjoy being an only child.
Anyway, moving on. So, first we have to, even though I think this is something that we are at least passingly familiar with, we do have to start, as we always do, with defining what is cloning. Well, one of my sources defined it as the deliberate production of genetically identical individuals. Pretty straightforward, right?
Absolutely.
Wait, so say that again?
The deliberate production of genetically identical individuals.
Okay, so deliberate would be the key word there, because it's like, for a minute there, I'm like, so what about twins? But yeah, deliberate.
Oh, no,
okay.
no. I'll get to that. I've got notes about that. I have notes about that.
Let him talk, JR. Yes. Let him talk. It's his show.
Yes. Well, I mean, he's allowed to talk with me while this is going on. I don't want this to be a lecture. I mean,
I can raise my hand. I can have questions.
Yes, quite. Wait, where'd that come from?
Yes, quite.
Wait. What? I'm always surprised when that flies out of my mouth.
Yes, quite.
Yes, Jimmy. I'm just as concerned as you are. Anyway, that was weird. Anyway, so it goes on to say, quote, each newly produced individual is a clone of the original, obviously. And then it talks about identical twins, or we could take it a step further, like in today's movie, identical triplets are natural clones. Because how do you get identical twins? It is when a fertilized egg splits in half or splits into multiple pieces. When it's fraternal twins, that's two separate eggs that get fertilized. So that's the difference there.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So again, from my source, clones contain identical sets of genetic material in the nucleus, the compartment that contains the chromosomes of every cell in their bodies. Thus, cells from two clones have the same DNA and the same genes in their nuclei. Which is also true of twins.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And have you guys heard of mitochondria?
Of course. That's a phrase I remember back in college. I don't remember what it means, though.
Not quite familiar with that.
Well, if you remember the Zillion invasion during Operation Final Wars, they wanted to eat humans for the mitochondria.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fun. Captain Gordon is the head of security here, and he's got quite a lot of stories to tell about that. But mitochondria were described in my research as, quote-unquote, energy-generating factories that contain some of the DNA.
Contain DNA within like cells?
Mm-hmm.
Or just
in the cell.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So mitochondria have their own DNA and they can reproduce. Yeah. And mitochondria have their own DNA and they can reproduce independently. So, quote unquote, true clones have identical DNA in both the nuclei and the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, this kind of sounds pretty straightforward when you're coming down to cloning. Basically,
I mean, there were some of my, and I consulted with some of the scientists here on the island about this, and sometimes it got a little more technical than I needed it to be. So I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can. Yeah, but it also says some clones, some quote unquote clones have identical nuclear DNA, but not necessarily, but they may also have different mitochondrial DNA. So we talked about twins, identical twins being natural clones, but there are other organisms that, quote unquote, clone themselves through asexual reproduction. Yeah, there's a kaiju here, an infamous kaiju who can do that. Well, actually, he can't. He can't now, but his daddy?
He did.
Yeah, his parent could.
Let's not talk about Gino.
About what?
Gino?
Gino? Oh, you mean Gino? Be nice to Gino.
Gino.
Get out. Oh, wait, what?
What? Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. So, asexual reproduction, that is when a new individual is generated from a copy of a single cell from the parent organism. That is the technical definition that I found. And this actually does happen in some animal species, like sharks, amphibians, lizards, and snakes. So it's not just Gino. Okay. It's not just Gino. And also there are plants that it happens to. Did you know we actually eat cloned plants?
That makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah. Bananas.
A lot of their seeds will go pollinate in the air and eventually drop on the ground and grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but bananas in particular are technically, the bananas we eat are technically clones. Because apparently,
interesting.
Yeah, because they, quote unquote, reproduce through something called vegetative propagation. Technical terms all around here. And according to my research, it takes 30 years to breed a banana from a seed. 30 years. What? Yeah. So they speed up the process through through cloning, quote unquote cloning.
Huh.
So which was the original?
That's interesting.
Yeah. And this is also done for other
They should make a movie out of that. Finding the original banana.
The original banana.
Which came first, the banana or the banana?
Yeah. Well, this is also done to speed up the process. They also do this with potatoes, apples, grapes, pears, and peaches.
Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense if you're cloning bananas and you're waiting to accelerate apples at the grocery store, you see them by the bunches, so it would make sense that you would have to clone at least a few of them.
Yeah, so this season alone, that is now the second crazy fact about bananas that I have learned. The other one being that technically there is a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of antimatter in bananas.
No kidding.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, go back and listen to the episode. Cool. Go back and listen to my episode on the giant claw, and you'll find out all about it. Let that sink in a little bit.
I'm eating. That's antimatter.
And it's the tiniest amount of it. It is incredibly minuscule. But there you go. So it's cloned antimatter. There you go.
Okay, so what happens when a radiated person such as myself eats cloned antimatter? Am I a superhero?
Maybe you should go talk to the scientists on the island about that, or to Kong. He eats lots of bananas. Maybe that's why Kong is the way he is. Anyway,
Kong and I seem to have more in common anyway.
Do you have an axe?
No, but we both communicate in grunts.
Ah, I see.
Man, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Anyway, so there are 3 different types of quote-unquote artificial cloning, as opposed to quote-unquote natural cloning. And these are gene cloning, reproductive cloning, and therapeutic cloning. So.
Therapeutic?
Yep.
How does that work?
Let me explain. So my research says, quote, gene cloning produces copies of genes or segments of DNA. Reproductive cloning produces copies of whole animals. Therapeutic cloning produces embryonic stem cells for experiments aimed at creating tissues to replace injured or diseased tissues, end quote.
Okay, so that's the type of cloning going on where everybody's up in arms about it.
Yep, and I found stuff about that.
Cells.
Yep, I found out stuff about that too.
Okay.
This is all very relevant because our new boss here on the island, Mr. Cameron Winter, has famously said that he would be doing more kinds of experiments if the government would just get over that quote-unquote whole cloning thing.
I know Cameron Winters. He's a work of art.
Sure. If you like coronary capitalist. Wait, no, crony capitalist. Oh, sorry. Typo in my notes.
I feel like there's a joke there. I don't know.
A little bit.
Something about a bar mitzvah. I don't know.
Yeah, where are you on drugs? See, Jimmy is wondering too.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, sure. We have laws here on Monster Island about such things.
I didn't say I'm on them now.
Yeah.
I'm
anyway.
behind.
So, a couple more quotations related to therapeutic cloning that I should mention here. So, it is the most medically applicable type of cloning for humans, which creates cloned embryonic stem cells of a patient to create genetically identical cells that can treat medical conditions. Another quotation here. Therapeutic cloning refers to the use of embryonic stem cells that in our lab we derive from somatic cells from a patient's skin, which was said by, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Shaukrat Mikalipov, who's an embryologist at the Oregon Health and Science University in Portland.
Okay. In Portland.
Yeah. And this person went on to say, quote, in our research lab, we can develop these cells into different kinds of cells in the body, such as neurons or cardiovascular cells, end quote. So that's a big part of what they're doing there. And that has been controversial, as you were hinted at, JR. And there have been laws passed in response to that, which I'll bring that up here in a minute. So a quick little note about reproductive cloning. That requires the use of a surrogate mother so they can develop the cloned embryo. Mm-hmm. And take a wild guess outside of, say, my pseudo-sister, the most famous cloned organism in the world. Does everyone, you might be just old enough to remember this. This was a big event.
I remember somebody like long ago. Didn't they clone a sheep?
Yep, Dolly the sheep.
Yeah.
Dolly the sheep, and the researchers who did it, they needed to clone 277 embryos, 29 of which were healthy enough to implant, but only one survived until birth. One in 277.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Yep.
Well, I still can't believe they cloned it, because I remember hearing the first time I heard about that, the clone, they said where the original used to like walk around the center, whatever you want to call it, the clone actually ended up visiting those same places and like favoring the same as the original.
Well, that's interesting because the next line that I had, the next bullet point I had here is that, contrary to popular belief, genetically identical clones don't necessarily look and act the same way. I mean,
interesting.
I mean, we all know, say, identical twins, and they don't necessarily act the same way all the time. Say, the Peanuts, the singing duo who played the Shobajin back in the 60s, they actually had very slight differences that they had to hide whenever they would perform. One of them had a small mole, I think, on her cheek, and they would hide it with makeup to hide to maintain the illusion that they were exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because twins, particularly identical twins, are incredibly rare in Japan for whatever reason. So it was a big deal. Yeah. Because genes are not the only determining factor for this. Environment plays a huge role, including time and place. Hence why my pseudo-sister doesn't act exactly like me.
One could argue that.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So, for example, did you know there is actually a cloned cat
All right, so
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, the cloned cat's name, and I'm not entirely sure how to say this. It's Cece, but it's big C, little c.
Cece.
Yeah, CC, but it's a big C and then a little c.
Cubed.
Not even cute. Dude,
Square.
You need a 3. That's a number. But anyway, it's a female calico who looks different than her mother. And the explanation that they have for that is because the color and pattern of coats can't be attributed exclusively to genes. And
so what year did the clone sheep take place?
It was the mid to late 90s. I know. I have the exact. I have more notes on Dolly here in a minute that will give the exact year for that.
Okay, because I didn't know what the difference in years were between the cat and the
it was a few years. It was within, I think, 5 to 10 years after that. I think I have some notes on that as well. But it all goes back to the X chromosome and how it interacts with everything. My note on this gets a little bit technical, but there's enough variation in there, enough of a variable that this calico cat didn't look exactly like the quote unquote mother.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
And also, contrary to popular belief, although in my case this didn't quite work out, but that's because my pseudo-sister came from very unusual circumstances. Studies have shown that clones are not weaker than the original, and nor are they born pre-aged. That's a misnomer, according to my research.
What do you mean pre-aged? Like they're not born?
If the genes that you got were already, say, like 30 years old, when you made the clone, it would be pre-aged. So it would live 30 years less compared to the original.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's not entirely true. So, what animals have been cloned? Well, more than you would think. It's not just Dolly the sheep or Cece, copy 2. Wait, what? Because that's what it looks like. It literally looks like copy 2 on an email. That's how they spell it. So, 1979. Yeah, all the way back then.
Wow.
They made genetically identical mice by splitting mice embryos in a test tube and then planting the resulting embryos into adult female mice. Mm-hmm. And then scientists made genetically identical cows and a sheep and chickens by transferring the nucleus of a cell taken from an early embryo into an egg and that had been emptied of its nucleus.
I mean, that would definitely solve a lot of world hunger issues. I mean, you
would think. And then 1996, that's when Dolly happened. Scottish researchers did it using the cell of a 6-year-old sheep from the udder cell of a 6-year-old sheep. And then, not to be out... What?
Oh, I was going to say, that's just crazy for me to think about, that we have the capability to clone animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the precursors can clone kaiju, apparently.
Well, I have a question about the kaiju and all this, but I'm going to let you finish your...
Yeah. Well, and then speaking of kaiju in Japan, weak connection, I know, but 2 years later, the Japanese cloned 8 calves from one cow.
Wow.
But only 4 of them survived.
Okay, because I was going to ask if the rate of cloning the sheep was 200 to 1, what would be the survival rate of the calves? But you
I just told you. Yeah.
Yeah, you answered that.
Yeah, and then other mammals that have been cloned from somatic cells. We already talked about a cat, but there's also been a deer, a dog, a horse, a mule, an ox, a rabbit, and a rat.
Why do you need to clone a rabbit? They already do that themselves.
Yeah,
very quickly.
That is true.
Very quickly, I may add. If they prefer more than one copy.
They just have one rabbit.
Let's just hope that nobody in the island decides to clone the lepus. The one lepus that we have here on the island. Let's keep it one, shall we?
Please, dear God, just keep it one.
We already have one night of the lepus. We don't need another one. In addition, through embryo splitting, scientists have also been able to clone a rhesus monkey. I'm not sure what a rhesus monkey is. That might be something for Jimmy to Google and put into his follow-up blog for the episode, but there you go. They cloned a monkey.
Yeah, Jimmy, start doing some work, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You leave my comic book collection out of this.
So, geez. very protective of those comic books. So
I am.
Yeah, so this all leads to the all-important question, what about human cloning? At least in the traditional sense and not teleporter shenanigans. Like with me. I'll explain later. Anyway, well, in 1998, there were South Korean scientists who claimed that they successfully cloned a human embryo. But they also said the experiment was interrupted very early and the clone was just a group of 4 cells. Convenient.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So their work was basically just all bull.
Yeah, probably.
We just wanted attention.
And then in 2002, Clone-Aid. That is an actual name. Clone-Aid.
Clone-Aid.
Mm-hmm. I hope I said that right. It's Clonaid. Clone-Aid? Klondike?
No, that's Clone-Aid.
We got Powerade, we got Gatorade, and especially we got Clone-Aid.
Clone-Aid, yeah. Apparently you drink it and suddenly there's a duplicate of yourself.
Don't forget to drink your Clone-Aid before dinner.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but it was part of a religious group, apparently, that believes humans were created by aliens.
I mean, as one does.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They had a news conference to announce the birth of what they claimed was the first human clone. And appropriately, they said it was a girl named Eve.
Huh.
Uh-huh.
Huh?
However, despite repeated requests from the research community, other scientists were like, "Oh, let us see it." They didn't provide any evidence.
Of course they did.
Of course they did.
For that or the apparently 12 other human clones that they supposedly created.
What? 12?
Yeah, but they only wanted to talk about one. Yeah.
Where did the other 12 come from?
That's a good question. Well, it's more like the other 11. They only want to talk about Eve. I guess Eve is like, it's the one girl and she's pretty or something. I don't know.
It's the one popular girl in high school.
Yeah, it's the popular girl in their clones. Here's a wild question. If she's a clone, who did you clone her from? That'd be one of my questions. Who did you clone? Anyone important?
It's a clone clique. They all have a popularity status.
Okay, here, we're going back to South Korea. 2004, a group led by, and I'm sorry if I screw this name up, Woo Suk Hwang. Get your minds out of the gutter. Anyway, from Seoul National University, published a paper in the Science Journal claiming that he had created a human embryo, a cloned human embryo in a test tube. But after an independent scientific committee took a look at that, they couldn't find any proof to support his claim. And then in January of 2006, Science announced that his paper had been rejected.
Oh, poor baby.
That's a shame.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Apparently, human cloning is very difficult. And there's a reason for that. There's a technical reason for that. If I bore all of you with this, my apologies. But it's not just humans, it's primates in general. It's because they have 2 proteins that are essential to cell division. They're called spindle proteins.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very close to the chromosomes in primate eggs. If you remove an egg's nucleus to make room for a donor nucleus, it also removes those proteins and it interferes with cell division.
I mean, you're talking very technical.
I know I am. But when you're talking about other mammals, we talked about the other mammals, the cats, the rabbits, the mice, the rhesus monkey. Yeah. Rhesus. Yeah. You heard me right. Rhesus. Oh, the things you never know what get cut. Their spindle proteins can spread throughout the egg. So you don't lose it when you put in a donor nucleus.
Okay. I think I understand.
I heard of the term spindle cells.
Spindle protein.
Yeah, spindle protein at one point. But I never exactly delve into it.
Also, apparently some dyes in ultraviolet light will damage primate cells and prevent them from growing. So going in the nucleus. So that goes back to it as well. So it's just really hard to do, basically.
Yeah, they proved that on Star Trek Picard season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why he's a weird kind of android thing. I'm a little confused about that. Anyway, as we were hinting at earlier, the creation and destruction of human embryos is big sticking point for a lot of religions. And they worry about the diseases and conditions that can, that might be inflicted upon a cloned baby along those lines. There's ethical issues that come into this. Hence the famous Kramer Winter line about getting over that whole cloning thing.
He's a fun guy.
Yeah. So it's because of this that many countries and U.S. states have banned human cloning experiments. However, this is kind of interesting. There's a lot of state laws against it, but there's no federal law in the United States against cloning humans.
Really?
So, yeah, it's individual states that have put bans on it.
So you could, let's say California was one of those states that you could clone in. You could potentially do research there.
Jimmy, look up which states actually have the bans and which ones don't. I would be curious to find out. But intellectual property attorneys Nob Martins said, quote, 10 states allow the creation of human cloned embryos, but prevent them from being implanted. So researchers can destroy them to create embryonic stem cell lines. That sounds a little bit like splitting hairs there a little bit, and a dangerous splitting of hairs. that
sounds like the whole killing a fetus for its embryonic cells. When do you consider the fetus born? And on top of that, would clones have lives?
Yeah.
And do they matter?
Yeah.
That's really sticky situation.
Yeah, that is a very sticky situation and is beyond the pale of this podcast. And there are 30 countries that have banned human cloning experiments, according to a 2007 review from Rice University. In 15 countries, they have banned human reproductive cloning, but not the creation of cloned embryonic stem cells.
Okay.
All right, so I guess that still factors into when do you consider life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a very sticky situation. So I'm not going to read the whole statement, but the American Association for the Advancement of Science does have a statement on human cloning. It's several paragraphs long, but I'm just going to read one that specifically addresses the ban on reproductive cloning, which says, AAAS endorses a legally enforceable ban on efforts to implant a human cloned embryo for the purpose of reproduction. The scientific evidence documenting the serious health risks associated with reproductive cloning, as shown through animal studies, make it unconscionable to undertake this process. At the same time, we encourage continuing open and inclusive public dialogue in which the scientific community is an active participant on the scientific and ethical aspects of human cloning as our understanding of the technology advances. End quotes.
Okay, and sorry, I'm being that guy. Can you tell me what reproductive cloning is again?
That's where you're actually reproducing a full organism.
Okay, so they're saying cloning is all right as long as you don't intentionally plan on growing it to become a human. You can still use the embryonic cells.
Yeah, embryonic cells, or you can do, so that's therapeutic cloning, or you can do the cloning of just, strands of DNA and things like that, not a full organism.
But yeah, the embryonic cells is probably what you would want out of that to try to place in other places for
now
limbs and stuff like that.
Where exactly do they get the embryonic stem cells? You said from human skin.
Yeah, they would use it from skin to make the clones, so they can harvest them. You can also get stem cells from adults. That has been a proposed alternative to embryonic stem cells, is to get them from adults.
Okay.
Which doesn't hurt anything. You just extract them, and then the body just makes more of them.
See, right. Somebody told me that they get stem embryonic cells from the fetus or something, and I guess that was a very touchy subject or something. But
it is, because in order to do that, you would have to kill the fetus. That's why people have issues with it.
And that was the whole controversy a few years ago, Reb. That's why the argument is going around: where does life begin? At the heartbeat, a fetus, or where does it begin? Because essentially you're killing off a child so you can get those cells to put in another DNA and
that's
use
why
them elsewhere.
That's one of many, well, not many, but several reasons why religious groups take issue with it.
Right.
So, what could be potential applications for cloning? This was kind of interesting. You can replicate desirable traits in livestock so you can dodge the genetic lottery. All right, makes sense. And then these are some interesting applications for human cloning. We get there. You could have infertile couples who want to have a child, and so that you can make a child for them through cloning using some of their own DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or with another nucleus donor, but it would be genetically related to them.
It wouldn't, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see where it's going.
Yeah, or this application, I have to admit, this is where it gets a little dicey, I think. Parents who've lost a child could have the dead child cloned.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Or people who need to have an organ transplant or cord blood transplanted, you can clone it from their own or from their child's disease so that they can collect genetically identical tissue from a cloned fetus or newborn. So it could be, there's medical applications. But again, you get into the same issues, like, is that ethical? Is it ethical to do that? Yeah. So that's where you start getting into some dodgy territory. Cloning a dead child is just all kinds of weird. Admittedly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of movies out there that have done that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, actually, the second Jurassic World was one of them. So, but,
oh, yeah. That plot twist made no sense.
yeah, I didn't care much for that one.
Yeah, but that's a different episode for a different time.
Yeah.
So another application for cloning, going back to Dolly, is that they can use sheep that have been genetically modified to produce milk that contains human protein essential for blood clotting. You can use that for medical treatments.
Okay.
So if their blood doesn't clot, you can use the protein from this milk, and it will help their bodies actually clot.
Drink this clone sheep's milk.
Yep. And the FDA has decided as of January 2008 that meat and milk from cloned animals are safe.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
They've tested it.
Apparently. Depends on how much faith you put in the FDA, I guess. Some people don't. Just saying. Anyway, another application is you can clone populations of animals who are endangered or even possibly extinct. Looking at you, Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Our competition.
I don't think that's a good idea. Judging by the 6 movies that are out, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, well, yeah, and yeah, like I said, our competition. Just saying.
And yes, because I favor you guys over them anyway. So
I mean, they're starting to make artificial intelligence, despite the fact there are movies about how that's a terrible idea. Terminator, The Matrix, but
all the things. GLaDOS. Who, by the way, the voice actress for GLaDOS was in Pacific Rim. She was the computer voice.
Thank you. I forgot to bring that up. That's one of my favorite lesser-known facts about that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and in 2001, researchers created the first clone of an endangered species. It was an Asian ox called a guar. I hope I said that right. Guar.
Guar. That sounds like what's his name?
Wasn't that a band on Beavis and Butthead? No, that was Guar.
No, Christopher Walken. It sounds like Christopher Walken trying to like hit on a girl and Guar.
Wow. Unfortunately, the baby Guar, which was developed inside of a surrogate cow mother, died after just a few days. Sad. Then in 2003, there was another endangered species of ox called the banteg that was successfully cloned. And then there were 3 African wildcats who were cloned from frozen embryos.
Ooh, interesting.
And then relatedly, and I think this is the same kind of dicey I think you can get into with cloning dead children, people also want to clone their dead pets.
Pet cemetery?
Now that they go to the pet cemetery to find the DNA, I guess.
Don't use the ancient burial grounds, people. It doesn't work.
It never ends well.
If Stephen King's taught me anything.
And if we can using stem cells, you can. We already talked about it a little bit. You can use stem cells to create new organs for people or new cells to replace damaged ones. So that's why they're really interested in researching this. Yeah, getting those stem cells, it could be a huge medical breakthrough.
Well, yeah, no, I the reason I bring that up is because both you know my medical history, so that was actually considered like an early option. Like we're like, hey, we could look into this. I was like, no, don't want that. No,
yeah, don't want that on your conscience.
I don't want to clone. Yeah, I don't want that on my conscience. No.
Yeah, I understand. I totally get it. And before this comes off the rails anymore, because technical difficulties, those of you who are listening to this on the, shall we say, VOD, you don't get to hear that, thankfully.
So I did have one last question about cloning. This is related to the movie.
Uh-huh.
So if every kaiju in that movie is a clone, why is there only one that gives birth? If they're clones, wouldn't that mean all the other kaiju have some type of embryo?
That is a very good question. Maybe the other kaiju didn't live long enough to have babies?
Yeah, because I was like, if they're all clones, at one point they are ready to give birth. So why is there only one of them that
At least in the movie, if you watch the supplementary material, the sequels and everything, the tie-in media, the anime, the black, they're reproducing because they're a baby kaiju.
That's true. Right.
So, I mean, just because they're clones, I don't think that negates the fact that they would have the ability to reproduce.
Right, but I'm just saying, because that particular kaiju wasn't on our side of the rift long enough to reproduce.
Yeah.
So why is it that one has a baby and the others don't?
I don't know. Ask the precursors. But it would make sense if you're going to genetically engineer bioweapons and you want to keep them around. Giving them the ability to reproduce sounds like a smart move.
Didn't we talk about this with Jack, with the whole Jurassic Park thing?
Yeah.
Life finds a way.
Yep. Exactly.
True. I'm looking too much into it.
Possibly. And now we're moving on to our closing segment. All right, so really quickly, I want to go over a little bit of listener feedback. I've got a fair amount to go over, but I'm not going to do it all at once. So I'm going to mention a couple of comments that we've gotten on the YouTube channel for some of the YouTube versions of our episodes. Starting with one from episode 62, which was Eric Anderson versus the Blob, 1958, from Neon Riley, who is actually Neil Reeby, who's been on the show before. Just saw him at G-Fest a few weeks ago. So, he said, when I first saw this movie when I was a kid, the Blob monster scared me while at the same time I thought he was cool. I still consider this movie on the high end of 50s monster movies. The characters felt authentic. I can imagine time traveling back to the 50s and finding people who behaved like the characters in the movie, which is actually something that Eric and I talked about in that. We're like, this is one of the most Americana movies I think that has ever been made. Have you guys ever seen the original Blob?
It has been a very long time. I probably watched it. Last time I watched it was a kid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall what the 1958 one you said.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall watching that. I did watch the later one. Was it in the late 80s? Or
the 80s, yeah, the 80s remake.
Yeah, I've seen the 80s remake, but I've not seen the original.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Although, if you guys are interested, the Blob, if you get it, do it while you can. The Blob is still on display here in the island, on loan to us from the good people of Pennsylvania.
Thank you,
I'll bring my camera.
That's why you brought a cell phone, right? Right?
Of course. Yes, cell phones.
Yeah. You know, the cameras that we all have in our pockets now. And then here's one more from a first-time commenter on YouTube. His name is Ethan Reynolds. He commented on episode 63, which was King Kong vs. Godzilla, with my friend, the YouTuber Alyssa Goji Geek, who I also just saw at G-Fest a few weeks ago. And it's a multiple paragraphs long. I'm just going to read the first paragraph because he goes into, as he put it, an alternate universe fanfic that he's making based on King Kong vs. Godzilla, it is very amusing. I will say that. You know, he's combining a lot of different things in order to make it happen, but He wrote, "Hey there, love your podcast of your mini analysis of this film. I think the film is very good, but I don't feel that it doesn't hold up as well as it did long ago." I'm guessing he means I don't feel that it holds up. At its core, the film is basically a Japanese remake of the 1933 King Kong merged with a sequel to Godzilla Raids Again 1955. But it's still an enjoyable film. I would agree with him there. I mean, to this day, it's still the highest grossing Godzilla film ever. Or at least the most popular. It sold the most tickets. Have you guys seen that one?
The original King Kong versus
Godzilla, yep.
It's been a long time. But
the next important question is...
Of course I've seen it.
Yeah, the next important question is, did you see it sub or dub?
I saw it dubbed.
With Eric Carter, United Nations News, and the scientist who uses a children's book to illustrate what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Kong is a thinking animal. Godzilla has the brain the size of a walnut. That's not how this works, dude. Let me tell you, I know scientists here on the island who take great umbrage with that guy. It's like, you know nothing.
Is your name Jon Snow? Because you know nothing.
Exactly. And now, my friends, we get to one of the most exciting segments on the podcast. Are you ready to tap into your inner anime character for this?
Let's do it.
Bring it.
It's time for the Patreon shoutouts.
Travis Alexander,
Danny Demena,
Eli Harris,
Chris Cook,
there's Damon Noyes,
Bex from Redeemed Otaku,
the Cellcast,
Eric Anderson,
Ted Williams, Tofu Fury. Oh, now we just need to do that for about 90 episodes, and then we'll get our power up.
Wait, hold on. No, right. I'm done.
Yeah, you cannot achieve the next level of power without being herniated and constipated at the same time. This is how anime works. Right? Anyway, jokes at the expense of anime aside, we got that taken care of, and now I need to preview the next couple of episodes that we have coming down the pipeline for all of you kaiju lovers. Next up, and I did think about having Jack on for this because I know he loves it. And yes, you too love this, Jimmy. Got a crush on somebody from this movie. Yes, I know, and you were trained by Glenn, and Nick Adams is your spirit animal, blah, 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 moving on. Anyway, so yes, Invasion of Astro Monster, or Monster Zero, as part of our continuing series, Godzilla Redux. I'm excited about this one, as you can tell. And so is Jimmy.
All the enthusiasm of the second Pacific Rim movie.
Yes. Yes, Clark. Wait, where'd that...
Yes,
I did it again. What the frick? Jimmy, you recently came into possession of something related to this film. Right. Oh, you don't have it yet. It's coming. Okay, I understand. We'll talk later. Anyway, so that's what we have coming up next. I have finally finalized my guest. It is a YouTuber who goes by the name The Dapper Man. And he reviews movies, and he's also part of a podcast called The Bottom Shelf, which reviews bad movies. And he frequently loses his mind and then taps into his inner angry Irishman.
This sounds amazing.
I'm going to be very curious to see how this episode goes. I know he's been a listener for a while. And then... yes, we'll be getting into a bonus episode, as I hinted at. Jack will be coming back, where he will be defending, heroically, I am sure, Pacific Rim Uprising. Because change my mind, that is an awful, awful movie. I need to be told why it is not, somehow.
You need a better man than me.
Oh, well, that's why it's Jack and not you.
It's true.
We'll see if he is up to the task. And then Ameri-kaiju will continue when we will be joined by the hosts of the podcast Record All Monsters. And we'll be talking about, it's kind of an indie film, kinda, but it does fall under the banner of Ameri-kaiju. We'll be talking about Colossal. Have you guys ever seen Colossal?
Oh my god, that's the movie that actually
is that what Sandra Bullock?
No.
Never mind. I'm sorry.
It's not Sandra Bullock. No, it's Anne Hathaway.
Where isn't it the one where she's like steps into the sandbox?
Yep.
And she can. That's the movie that actually I wanted to get into kaiju proper with.
Really?
Yeah, that's the movie that I wanted to dive head deep into and just be like, okay, I accept this culture and I want to start watching more kaiju movies.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like you're
kind of my American gateway into it.
Well, it sounds like you're going to have a good time listening to that episode. Yeah.
I will. I look forward to that.
Yeah. So the hosts of Record All Monsters are a husband and wife team. So I think they'll be bringing some very interesting insights regarding that film, which it's a dark movie. It gets into some it's a dark comedy. So it's funny, but it also gets into some very serious issues, as I'm sure you know, JR.
Oh yeah. No, that's extremely, like, I was not expecting that. Because the trailers play it off as very lighthearted.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, whimsical. But man. Whew. Yeah. It's intense. Have you seen it, Reb?
I have not. Sorry.
No. Give it a watch sometime. It touches on some, like I said, some very interesting things. Very, very interesting. And has Anne Hathaway in it. I don't know if you heard me say that earlier.
Anne Hathaway. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was Sandra. For whatever reason, I thought it was Sandra Bullock. So.
I don't know if Anne Hathaway's ever been confused with Sandra Bullock before.
I don't know.
Catwoman, Sleepless in Seattle.
Sleepless in Seattle is a kaiju movie, right?
When did that happen? Actually, that might fall under one of the movies that if you added a kaiju, it would somehow make it better. I'm just saying, I was on Derailed Trains of Thought, and we talked about how could you add a kaiju to a bunch of different stories and actually make them better, and how would you put the kaiju in there? Give it a listen sometime, but the best one we came up with was we figured out how to add a kaiju to Treasure Island, and it was amazing.
Ooh, that sounds. I would want Sleepless in Seattle to stay exactly the same, but there's a kaiju in the background.
So the romance is taking place during a kaiju attack?
Yes. Like, nothing changes, except there's a kaiju in the background.
Wow.
I mean, I'd watch it.
See?
It sounds very Sekizawa. But anyway, now we come to one of the most important segments of the show, shameless self-promotion. So I'm just going to mention briefly, go listen to my spinoff podcast, Henshin and the Power Trip. I'm done. Go for it, fellas. And lady, sorry. Jack isn't even here, so there's only one fella.
But I did clone myself earlier. So.
This is true.
Yeah, that's fun.
All right, so if you guys like what you've been hearing from us, we have our own podcast called The Drift Space, where we just basically cover any type of movie that we feel is warranted. We're sorry about the delay. We've had some kind of life things happen, but we do plan on getting back into a regular schedule.
Did life find a way yet?
Life has found a way to screw up everything.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I am JR. You can find me on Twitter, Littleman_says1. You can find me on Instagram, Littleman Cosplay. And I don't know why, but I've joined the TikTok community, and you can find me there at Littleman Says.
Yeah, considering how low the bar is for good TikTok content, you do extremely well.
Well, thank you. I'll take the compliment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Rebecca, and if you people like this to see some of my artwork, just find me on the Linktree app. It's linktr.ee/reb.hudge, and watch out for new artwork. There may be some updates coming soon.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to hear Rebecca make a bunch of boys look like fools, listen to the Drift Space. Alrighty, well, I think we've got everything wrapped up. How about Jimmy and I walk you two back to his garage to get back into, how do you say it again?
Bouncing Betty! Oh, Jimmy, you stay where you are. I don't want you anywhere near this thing.
Oh, Jimmy.
You can't handle this power.
Okay, I mean, he was kind enough to house your Jaeger in his garage. I'm just saying. He doesn't give that privilege to just anybody.
That's true, but I fear this technology in his hands. I mean, I've seen the stuff you have in there. I know what cloning experiments go on.
Cloning?
Yeah, well, he's responsible for your sister, isn't he?
No.
Well,
all he did was hit the button on the teleporter.
Yeah, but it's a teleporter he created. Have you ever looked into that?
No, actually, he found it.
Oh, that's what he says.
Yeah, I'll explain on the way. JR, just shut your trap and I'll explain on the way there, okay? Okay, we're good now. We're good. So now, Jimmy.
I'm watching you, Jimmy.
Jimmy, before you open your big yapper again, I gotta get a better snap. Cue the credits. Thank you for listening to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast produced and hosted by Nate Marchand. If you want to join the discussion and be heard on the show, we'd love to hear from you. So email us at feedback@monsterislandfilmvault.com. Our website is monsterislandfilmvault.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Monster Island Film Vault, and on Twitter, where our handle is @TheMonsterIsla1. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok. Follow Jimmy from NASA on Twitter @NASAJimmy, and our many other colorful characters using the links in the show notes. The podcast logo was created by Tyler Souls from TylerDrawsComics.com. Our theme song is Wanderer on the Offensive, live edit by B33J, Sarax, Juan Madrano, and Nonsensical Lexus, which is a remix of Counterattack Battle with the Colossus and The Opened Way Battle with the Colossus by Kootani from the video game Shadow of the Colossus. All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders and no infringement is intended or implied. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and or Podchaser to spread the word about the show. You can also support us by joining MIFV Max on Patreon. The Monster Island Film Vault is a Moonlighting Ninjas media production. Sayonara! This is Media Master Marchand interrupting the rebroadcast of Kaiju Crescendo to bring you a special live report from Yamane Plaza. A mysterious kaiju has appeared on the Monsterland beach. The beast has a semi-insectoid body and a main head, yes, main head, with ant-like mandibles. A vaguely reptilian head protrudes from its humpback. Horrific, just horrific. It's staggering on 3 long spindly limbs and 1 huge malformed arm with a bulbous shoulder, hardly able to walk. I hear agony in its roars. Is it in pain? The EDF mutants are evacuating all tourists and personnel as I speak. The monster has attacked a passenger liner bringing tourists to the island. The White Heron has been deployed from Jimmy's garage to rescue survivors. Jimmy, move your camera drone to get a better shot of the creature. There. Whatever this kaiju is, it appears confused. How did it get here? Why didn't it trigger the island's security system? Where? Oh no. The beast is looking straight at us. You must hear the screams. It's coming! It's coming! Run! 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 Mutants are firing rocket launchers at the kaiju. The beast isn't even phased. Everyone within the sound of my voice, get off the island! Run! Run now before... What's that? Am I hearing... music? That's the Drift Space theme. How could... Kaiju owners... A mecha has fired missiles at the monster. Now it's grabbing the stunned creature and throwing it into the ocean. The music, it's blaring from huge speakers in the robot's head. Can it be? Yes, it's Bouncing Betty, the Jaeger piloted by the hosts of the Drift Space. Betty now stands between the Monsterland Resort and the creature. The beast lunges, but Betty intercepts it with its forearms. The robot grapples the kaiju's forelimbs with 2 hands and pummels the beast's abdomen with a flurry of piston punches. I hear bones crunching. Bluish green blood gushes from the creature's midsection. Smoke is emanating from the mecha's hands. Betty releases the monster, plunges its hands into the water to wash off the apparently acidic blood. The beast rushes at Betty. It grabs the monster by the shoulder with its freshly cleaned hands. The monster snaps at the mecha with its mandibles. The top hands have transformed into Vulcan cannons. The guns shoot the beast in the face. Well, one of its faces. The creature falls back, its primary head shredded to tatters. Bouncing Betty walks over to the twitching body and unloads its ammo on the second head. Bouncing Betty puts 2 hands on its hips and raises its, pardon the pun, hand cannons overhead. The music has stopped and,
as always, please always stay strapped.
Of course Jack would squeeze in the Drift Space's sign-off, but I swear that sounded pre-recorded. Anyway, Bouncing Betty turns and walks out into the ocean, slowly submerging beneath the waves. The Monsterland Resort is safe again thanks to the drifters. Whatever that creature was, I'm sure the island scientists will have a field day studying its remains. Just nobody let Hannibal Chow come here. That's asking for trouble. But in the meantime, all tourists must cooperate with the EDF mutants as they secure the island and tend to any injured. The resort is temporarily closed until further notice. This is Media Master Nate Marchand, signing out.